Imagine waking in the dead of winter, the fire long cold, and hearing something in the corner of the room. Not a creak of the house settling, not the wind pressing against the shutters. Something else. A wet, rhythmic sound, like tiny fingers working at thread on a spinning wheel that no one touched before you went to sleep. You lie still, you dare not breathe, and then the sound stops, and in the silence that follows, you realize with a cold certainty that whatever made that noise is now watching you from the dark. Welcome, friends, to a world where the home is not always safe, where the threshold between the living and the dead is thinner than the walls of a peasant's cottage, and where a creature born of grief, neglect, and ancient sorrow can take up residence in your house without ever asking permission. Tonight we are going deep into the heart of Slavic folklore to meet the Kikimora, one of the most unsettling, most misunderstood, and most deeply human spirits in the entire mythology of Eastern Europe. Before we go any further, if this kind of storytelling speaks to you, if you love myths that carry real weight and real darkness, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It genuinely helps us keep bringing these stories to life. And there is so much more still to tell. Now, let us begin. The Slavic world is old, older than most people in the modern era tend to imagine. For thousands of years across the vast forests and frozen plains of what is now Russia, Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, and beyond, communities of people built their lives around the rhythms of nature, the turning of seasons, and the constant, ever-present awareness that the world was full of things they could not fully see or understand. Spirits lived in rivers, in trees, in crossroads, in thresholds. The home itself was a sacred space, a boundary between the ordered world of the living and the chaos beyond. And like all sacred spaces, it needed to be guarded, it needed to be respected. And when it was not, something moved in. The Kikimora was that something. She was not a monster in the way we typically imagine monsters. She did not hunt in the forest. She did not drag travelers into the dark. She was domestic, intimate, and because of that, far more terrifying. She lived inside the walls of the house. She slept behind the stove or beneath the floorboards. She tangled thread, spoiled bread, pinched sleeping children, and tormented livestock until the animals went mad. And unlike a demon you could confront, unlike a beast you could flee, the Kikimora was already home. She was already there, and getting rid of her was never simple. So where did she come from? How did this creature take root in the imagination of an entire civilization? There are several explanations, and each one is darker than the last. The first, and perhaps most ancient explanation, connects the Kikimora to the souls of the dead, specifically the souls of those who died badly. In old Slavic belief, not all deaths were equal. A person who died peacefully, surrounded by family, properly mourned and buried with the correct rites, passed on to the realm of the ancestors. But those who died violently, suddenly, or before their time, those who were murdered, or drowned, or took their own lives, or died as unbaptized infants, these souls could not rest. They lingered, they wandered, and sometimes they settled. A Kikimora was often believed to be the spirit of a child who died before baptism, trapped between worlds, unable to move forward, drawn back to the warmth and noise of the living. That detail alone should give you pause, because it means that when a family was tormented by a Kikimora, they were in some sense being haunted by grief itself. The second explanation is more sinister and involves human agency. Across many regions of Slavic folklore, it was believed that a Kikimora could be deliberately placed in a house by an enemy. A sorcerer, a witch, or simply someone who harbored a deep grudge could fashion a small figure, sometimes from rags, sometimes from clay or wood, and hide it within the walls or beneath the foundation of a home during construction. Once sealed inside, the figure would animate, would become the Kikimora, and the family living above would suffer for years, sometimes for generations, without ever knowing why. This version of the legend speaks to something very real in human communities: the fear of hidden malice, of enemies who smile at you during the day and work against you in the dark. The third explanation pulls the Kikimora into the realm of the natural and the psychological. In many peasant communities, particularly through the long brutal winters of the northern Slavic regions, people spent months in close quarters, in dim light, with little food and enormous stress. Sleep was disrupted, illness was common, and in that environment, strange things happened to the mind. People heard sounds that were not there. They woke unable to move, certain that something sat on their chest. They found their work undone in the morning when they were sure they had completed it the night before. The Kikimora gave a name and a shape to all of that. She was the embodiment of domestic disorder, of the creeping anxiety that the home, the one place that should be safe, had turned against you. And the fourth explanation is perhaps the most fascinating. Some scholars of Slavic mythology suggest that the Kikimora is connected to an older, pre-Christian tradition of house spirits, beings who were originally neither good nor evil but simply present. Every home had its spirit, every hearth had its guardian. When Christianity spread through the Slavic world and the old beliefs were pushed underground, these neutral spirits were recast as demons, as threats, as things to be feared and expelled. The Kikimora may have once been something closer to a household deity, a spirit of the domestic world, who became monstrous only when the religion that honored her was forgotten. Now let us talk about what she actually looked like, because the descriptions are wonderfully strange and deeply unsettling. The Kikimora was almost always described as female, though her appearance varied significantly depending on the region. In some accounts, she was tiny, barely the size of a child, with a long, thin nose, disheveled hair, and eyes that glinted in the dark like embers. In others, she was described as an old woman, hunched and skeletal, dressed in rags, her skin the color of ash. Some accounts gave her the legs of a chicken, a detail that connects her to other spirits in Slavic tradition, including the famous Baba Yaga. Others described her as entirely invisible, known only by the sounds she made and the chaos she left behind. There were also two distinct types of Kikimora recognized across different regions. The first was the house Kikimora, sometimes called the domovoi Kikimora, who was associated with the interior of the home, with spinning and weaving in particular. She was the one who tangled your thread, who unraveled your work overnight, who made the spinning wheel turn by itself in the dark. The second was the Marsh Kikimora, or Bolotnitsa, who lived in swamps and bogs and was considered far more dangerous. She could lure travelers into the water, could cause illness and madness, and was associated with the wild, untamed places beyond the safety of the village. The stories told about her are numerous and layered, and some of them are genuinely haunting. There is a tale from the Russian countryside, told in many variations, of a young couple who built a new home on the edge of a village. From the first night they moved in, things went wrong. The wife would spin thread in the evening and find it hopelessly knotted by morning. The bread she baked would be raw in the center, no matter how long she left it in the oven. The baby cried without stopping through the night, and when the husband checked on the child, he sometimes found small bruises on the infant's arms, as though tiny fingers had been pinching the skin. They called for the village elder, who listened carefully and then asked a single question. Who built this house? And was anyone angry with you when it was built? The couple admitted that the carpenter they had hired had quarreled with the husband over payment and left the job in fury. The elder nodded and said nothing more. He searched the walls and the floor until he found it, a small figure made of twisted straw, hidden beneath the hearthstone. He removed it with great care, using specific prayers and a branch of rowan, and burned it at the crossroads before dawn. After that night, the house was quiet. That story encapsulates something essential about the Kikimora. She is not random. She is caused. She is a consequence. Someone's anger, someone's grief, someone's unresolved pain becomes embedded in the fabric of the home, and the family living there suffers for it. That is a profoundly human idea. Another well-known tale involves a woman who was known in her village for being lazy with her housework. In Slavic folk belief, the Kikimora was said to be particularly drawn to homes where the domestic order was neglected, where floors went unswept, where spinning was left unfinished, where the rituals of the household were not observed. This woman would leave her thread unspun for days at a time, and one winter morning she woke to find the entire room filled with tangled, knotted thread, stretching from wall to wall in a web so dense she could barely move through it. At the center of the room, just visible through the tangle, something small and dark crouched over the spinning wheel, working furiously. When she screamed, it vanished, but the thread remained, and it took her 3 days to unravel it all. After that, she never let her work sit unfinished again. This is the moment in the story where I want to stop and ask you something directly. What do you think the Kikimora really represents? Is she a spirit of punishment? A consequence of neglect and disorder? Is she a ghost? The lingering pain of a life cut short? Is she the embodiment of an enemy's hatred, given form and purpose? Leave your interpretation in the comments below. I genuinely want to know what you think, because the most interesting thing about creatures like the Kikimora is that they resist a single clean answer. Now let us talk about what she symbolized on a deeper level, because the Kikimora is not simply a ghost story. She is a mirror. In Slavic peasant society, the home was a woman's domain. The spinning wheel, the bread oven, the care of children and animals. These were the responsibilities of the woman of the house. And the Kikimora targeted all of those things specifically. She tangled thread. She ruined bread. She tormented children and livestock. She disrupted the work that held the household together. In this sense, the Kikimora can be read as an externalization of domestic anxiety, the fear of failure in the roles that society demanded. She was the spirit of things left undone, of care not given, of order not maintained. And because those responsibilities fell so heavily on women, the Kikimora was also, in a quiet and uncomfortable way, a reflection of the pressures placed on women in that world. But she was also something more universal. She represented the idea that the home is never fully yours, that the past lives in the walls, that the people who were hurt in a space, or who died in it, or who built it with resentment in their hearts, leave something behind. That idea is older than any religion and more persistent than almost any other human belief. We still feel it. We still walk into certain rooms and feel uneasy for reasons we cannot name. We still hear sounds in the night and lie very still, waiting. The contradictions within the Kikimora legend are also worth examining, because they reveal something fascinating about how folk belief evolves over time. In some traditions, the Kikimora was not entirely malevolent. There are accounts of her being almost helpful in homes where the housework was done properly and the domestic order was maintained. In these versions, she might spin thread quietly through the night, adding to the family's work rather than destroying it. She might even be seen as a kind of guardian, a spirit who rewarded diligence and punished laziness. This dual nature, the Kikimora as both threat and potential ally, suggests that she was once a more complex figure than the simple demon she became in later Christian-influenced retellings. There is also the question of how to get rid of her, and the answers across different regions are wildly inconsistent. Some traditions say you must find the object she was bound to, the hidden figure or charm, and destroy it at a crossroads. Others say you must hang a specific stone with a natural hole through it, called a chicken god stone, above the door or near the spinning wheel. Some say you must recite prayers continuously for 3 days. Others say the only solution is to move, and some say that once a Kikimora has truly settled in a home, she cannot be removed at all, only endured. That last detail is the one that lingers. The idea that some hauntings are permanent, that some pain cannot be exorcised, only learned to live with. That is not a comfortable thought, but it is a deeply honest one. The Kikimora has survived into the modern era in ways both obvious and surprising. She appears in literature, in art, in theater, and in the broader cultural memory of the Slavic world. In Russia, her name became a common insult, used to describe a disheveled, chaotic, or frightening-looking woman, which tells you something about how folk belief can calcify into prejudice over time. But she also appears in a more dignified form, as a subject of serious scholarly study, as a figure in contemporary fantasy literature, and as a symbol reclaimed by people interested in the older, pre-Christian spiritual traditions of Eastern Europe. In the modern revival of Slavic paganism, sometimes called domovoi, the Kikimora is being reconsidered. Rather than a demon to be feared and expelled, some practitioners see her as a spirit of the household who deserves acknowledgement and respect, a being whose malevolence is not innate, but earned through neglect and disrespect. This reframing feels, in some ways, closer to what the original belief may have been before centuries of Christian influence reshaped it into something purely threatening. She has also entered popular fiction and film, appearing in fantasy novels and supernatural stories as a creature of ambiguous morality, sometimes villain, sometimes tragic figure, sometimes both at once. And that ambiguity is exactly right, because the most enduring folklore creatures are never simply monsters, they are questions. They are the shapes that human fear and human guilt take when they need somewhere to live. And that brings us to the final thought, the one that I want to leave with you. The Kikimora was born in the dark of winter, in the long cold nights when the fire burned low and the world outside was hostile and vast. She was born from grief, from the pain of children who died too soon and could not rest. She was born from hatred, from the spite of enemies who wished suffering on those they resented. She was born from anxiety, from the weight of domestic responsibility and the fear of failure. And she was born from something older still, from the ancient human understanding that the places we live are not neutral, that they absorb what happens within them, that they remember. The next time you hear a sound in your house at night and cannot explain it, the next time you find something you were certain you left in one place has moved to another, the next time your work seems to come undone overnight for no reason you can name, consider this: not every disturbance has a rational explanation. Not every presence in a home is invited, and some things once settled do not leave. The Kikimora is still there. She has always been there, waiting behind the stove, listening from beneath the floorboards, watching from the corner of the room with eyes that catch the last of the firelight. And she is very, very patient. Thank you so much for spending this time with us in the dark. If this story moved you, unsettled you, or made you think about the world a little differently, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel so you never miss what comes next. We have so many more stories to tell, and each one is stranger and deeper than the last. Now I want to hear from you. Which creature, which myth, which legend should we explore next? Leave your suggestions in the comments below. Whether it is another spirit from Slavic tradition, a creature from a completely different corner of the world, or a myth you have always wanted to understand more deeply, tell us. This channel exists because of your curiosity, and we take every suggestion seriously. The dark is full of stories. Let us keep telling them together.